Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. Today is the final day of Macbeth. So we've had a lot. We've had ghosts, we've had witches, we've had prophecies coming true, and we're right now in the middle of a war, which is kind of sort of starting with a forest attacking a castle because the guys took branches and they're hiding behind them as they advance. So it looks like the woods are moving towards the castle. So at this point, Macbeth is a little bit afraid, but he has decided he is going to fight as hard as he can possibly fight. He's not going to go down without a fight. So today we get to hear from Malcolme in Act 5, Scene 7, as it is known in the folio, but in other versions they split up the last scene, they split up 5-7 so that they get all the way to 5-9 in it, but you don't necessarily need to because they all kind of blend together, and Shakesyear goes back to, well, if they cut it up that way, or if you cut it up that way, it goes back to Shakespeare's trick of having all of these like little itty-bitty scenes, so there's a lot of movement off and on the stage to give the feeling of sort of a crazy battle happening. So Act 5, Scene 6 is really just the guys that were out in the woods saying, okay, let's get in the castle and fight. And then we start off Act 5, Scene 7 with Macbeth being like, okay, we're gonna fight, we're gonna do this, and then he goes off, and then some other people come on, and they're like, let's continue the fight. Macbeth kills Sayward's son to kick off the scene, Sayward being like one of the main generals on the English side. So Macbeth kills young Sayward, they go off, and then some other people come in, they're like, where's Macbeth, and we gotta go get him, and then they go off, and then Macbeth and Macduff end up on stage at the same time, and Macduff's like, you know, you might as well just call it a day at this point, and Macbeth's like, no, haha, no man of woman born can kill me, haha, and Macduff says, haha to you, because I was, from my mother's womb, untimely ripped. Meaning maybe he was born by cesarean section, and or maybe she died and then they got the baby out before he died too, or some such thing. The one thing that I will say is every woman that I personally know who has given birth via cesarean section will argue that that child is of her born. So that's just a weird semantic thing that shows the difference between the time that Shakespeare lived in and now. Macduff is considered not by woman born because he was born by cesarean section or some such thing, but he was still gestated inside a woman, and yeah, she gave him life, so whatever. Anyway, on this little bitty technicality, Macbeth kind of goes, and Macduff is like, so you might as well just give up, and Macbeth is like, no, I'm gonna fight until the very end. So they fight off stage, and then they like immediately come back on stage still fighting, and Macduff slays Macbeth. Dun dun dun. And at this point, several things can happen in the play in terms of the staging and all that sort of thing. Like Macduff can carry Macbeth off, or they can mutilate the body there on stage, whatever you want to have happen, because to finish off Act 5, Scene 7, once Macbeth has been killed, in the part of the play that many versions call Act 5, Scene 9, we start out with Ross and Malcolme and Sayward sort of taking stock of who has been killed in this battle, because the battle's like over, and then Macduff comes in carrying Macbeth's head, and he's like, booyah, here he is, the tyrant is gone and dead. Turns to Malcolme and says, all hail the King of Scotland, and everybody says, all hail the King of Scotland, and Malcolme says, we shall not spend a large expense of time before we reckon with your several loves and make us even with you. My thanes and kingsmen, henceforth be earls, the first that ever Scotland in such an honor named. What's more to do, which would be planted newly with the time, as calling home our exiled friends abroad that fled the snares of watchful tyranny, producing forth the cruel ministers of this dead butcher and his fiend-like queen, who, as 'tis thought, by self and violent hands took off her life. This, and what needful else that calls upon us by the grace of grace, we will perform in measure, time, and place. So thanks to all at once, and to each one whom we invite to see us crowned at Scone. And that's the end of the play. So it's Malcolme sort of, he's gonna try to be a good king, is what he's saying out of all this. Everybody that fought with him, everybody that was a Thane, he's going to give them the title of Earl, because that is not a title that has existed in Scotland before. So it's a bit of an elevation, and maybe also a bit of an olive branch with the English who fought with him against Macbeth. And he's going to welcome back people who had been exiled, probably most notably his brother Donalbain, who had fled to Ireland. And yeah, he promises that he's going to get around to all of these things, repaying everybody these debts that they are owed, and he's going to try to get Scotland back on a path of a non-tyrannical leader, and then the play ends. So that's it for Macbeth. It's an interesting play. I mean, it's fun, and yes, there's the spectacle. There's Banquo's ghosts showing up at the dinner, and there's the witches and whatever you want to do with them, and there's the moving forest, and there's all these things, and there's a war. There's a couple of them. There's all these very like spectacular things that can make it a very, very exciting production, but I think that it's also an interesting play from the psychological standpoint and also from the gender role perspective, because we get to see how Macbeth feels about the things that he was doing, about his reticence at the beginning of the play. You know, he was the one that was timid about killing Duncan in the first place and might have chickened out, whereas at least nowadays we tend to think, you know, the man is going to be the bloodthirsty one, the one that's so ambitious that he wants to get there. But in this play we have him being a little more cautious, a little more reticent until he actually does it, and his wife being the puppet master and the bloodthirsty one and the manipulator and all of that sort of thing, the ambitious one. She lives out her ambition through her husband gaining the throne. But we still get to see the humanity in her when she can't wash the blood off of her hands and ends up taking her own life because of the guilt of it all and that sort of thing. So and we also get to see, from the gender role perspective thing, we also get to see a moment of sort of squashed toxic masculinity after Macduff's whole family has been killed. And they're like, well, you know, you should take that and turn it into anger and go for it, fight a war. And he's like, yes, but I also need to feel it like a man. And he has to take a moment to mourn his family. So there's some very interesting things that exist in this play beyond just the spectacular. And that's probably why so many people like to do this play over and over and over and over and over again. So anyway, I hope you had fun with it. And tomorrow we get new play day. We get into Measure for Measure, which is, I guess, classified as a comedy, even though I might argue it's a bit more of a problem play than a comedy, because it's not necessarily super funny unless you think, you know, death by beheading is funny. Anyway, we'll learn more about that tomorrow on New Play Day as we dig into Measure for Measure. Mwah.